Hey guys, welcome back. So today in my hand I have a CZ75. The CZ75B, which is what I'm actually holding, is an import model, and the B denotes that it has some changes from the original CZ75, and this one has an internal safety that is a firing pin safety, so you can safely carry it in the mode that I currently have it in, which is a hammer down on a live round. And the CZ75 is an iconic military handgun from the Cold War. And the Czechs developed it in Czechoslovakia in the 1970s. And I remember as a kid reading about it in Soldier of Fortune magazine when it first started to be known to the rest of the world that it was out there. And so I was always fascinated by the handgun. It went on to be one of the most copied handguns in the world in terms of military handguns and even competition handguns and just regular civilian handguns. The CZ75 draws its inspiration from John Browning's work, the 1911 in the Browning High Power, but it has its own take on it that's truly Czech. So I want to talk about this handgun to start off the video, but I'm going to show you another handgun that was derived from this one that was adopted by Israel in the 1990s. But let's start off shooting this old girl, one of my favorite classic handguns. Man, there is nothing quite like a CZ75 when it comes to ergonomics. Simply beautiful handguns. And one of the things that makes them somewhat unique is the fact that they have their slide rails inverted, which is why you see such a small slide on top. The rails are down here inside. They're reversed from what you would expect to see on something like a 1911 or a Glock or a modern pistol like that. Here I have the Jericho 941. The Jericho 941 is the handgun that the Israelis would have developed around 1990 and adopted to replace the Browning High Power. When Israel became a state just after the Second World War, they had a whole bunch of surplus firearms that they were given or that they had purchased, and Browning High Powers were among them. But they wanted an indigenous design and something that they could issue to their forces, security forces and their military, and this is what they came up with. And as you can see, it clearly borrows very heavily from, if not directly copies, the Czech CZ75. But it has its own style to it, a style that I think is actually quite attractive. It has the same inverted slide rails, but you'll notice the front here is different. The dust cover extends all the way to the end here, has a slight taper cut to it, and the ergonomics are slightly changed with the hump back here. But the ergonomics of the gun feel as good as the CZ75, and in a certain way actually feel even better. But this is a current production handgun brought in by IWI US, and the handgun I'm going to show you next, that handgun is an actual surplus handgun brought in to the United States and sold through Classic Firearms that has the Star of David on it, and it is a retired police pistol, but it has a unique feature about it. So let's go ahead and fire this import version, which you can currently get from IWI US. Then let's take a look at that surplus handgun. These things are all steel and they have no weight to them, and very light trigger pulls on single action. All right, let's take a look at this police service handgun that was retired that I picked up from Classic Firearms. This is the retired military / police handgun that's a surplus handgun brought in, I believe, by Century Arms and sold through Classic Firearms. Now it has a Star of David up here and some police markings, which are so faint it's going to be almost impossible for Jason to get on the camera. I'll take some still photos of it. But you'll notice that externally it looks just like the gun we opened the video up with. Now you might find some that have IMI or IWI, and the IWI is the Israeli weapons industry, which was spun off from IMI years ago and privatized. So it's not uncommon to see these with IMI markings or IWI markings. So what makes this handgun different than the other one, first of all, on the current production gun that we see being imported in the United States, we don't have a 1913 rail here on the bottom, it's just smooth. And the biggest thing is, you'll notice the hammer's down and the trigger's back, and the gun's not broken. That's because this is a single action only handgun. It has the exact same controls as the gun that we opened up the video with, or the CZ75. It has a manual safety, slide lock, slide release, but this one is a single action only pistol. You can probably see it right there by my index finger. There is a plunger safety inside there. So unless the trigger's pulled, has a firing pin safety, the gun can't go off, which means if you wanted to carry it cocked and locked, you could, because if you should break the hammer from its sear and it would fall, it does have an internal safety that would prevent it from firing. However, the handgun wasn't really intended to be carried that way. Now you could also carry it in condition 2, which would have a live round in the chamber and the hammer down on it. Again, it would be safe because the trigger needs to be pulled for the gun to be fired, which would just require cocking the gun to make it ready for use. But the Israelis developed the Israeli method, and it dates back to when they were using Browning high powers. The high powers were not safe to be carried with the hammer back and the safety on, because if something broke, they didn't have an internal firing pin safety they could fire. They weren't safe to carry a hammer down on a live round for the same reasons, no internal safety. And so the Israelis wound up carrying them with a loaded magazine, empty chamber, hammer down, and when they would draw the pistol, they'd draw the gun, grab it, and shoot it out like that, and get their grip and fire. Now, I'm probably screwing up the exact method, but you get the idea. That's how the Israelis would carry their weapons, basically with a loaded magazine, nothing in the chamber, and the hammer down, and that's how they would ready their pistol for firing. So that makes sense. That's why this one is single action only. But with that single action only capability, you get the same trigger pull every time, which is nice and light on this handgun. It's all metal, like the gun we opened up the video with. It's a steel upper and lower. It doesn't have an aluminum lower, like you'll see some of the CZs that are coming in the country have. It's just an insanely pleasant handgun to shoot. Guys, you couldn't ask for a nicer shooting handgun. It sets nice and deep in the hand. What a neat piece of history, and the fact that it's single action only really sets it apart. You don't see this all that often on the surplus market. On the bottom of the trigger guard here, you can see the import marks. And you'll find a couple of different handguns in this type. Now, I believe that some of them were nickel finished and others were parked like this. This one was manufactured as a single action only handgun. If it were an armorer conversion, which they did do, you would find, here's the pivot pin for the trigger right there. You'd find another roll pin just in front of that that would prevent the trigger from going forward to what would be double action mode. And those were armorer conversions. This one was manufactured as a single action only, which you can see the trigger is cut in such a way that it engages with the frame and can't go forward. So again, a very, very cool piece of military surplus history you don't see all that often. Now, the magazines that it uses, this is the magazine it came with that's marked IWI. In my pocket, I have my CZ75B, and in its mag well, I have a CZ magazine. All right, so what you saw there was the gun not locking open on the last shot fired. Some of the current CZ75 magazines will lock the gun open, others won't, but the gun is such a close copy of the CZ75, it actually uses its magazines. The 941s were also produced with polymer lowers. Because the handguns had steel slides and steel frames, a lot of people didn't like the weight of the handgun, which is understandable. So the Israeli weapons industries did develop this polymer framed handgun, which uses the same magazines, has all the same fire controls, and is a double action, single action pistol with no decocker, just with a manual safety located in the exact same spot. And of course, like I said, the magazines are the same. Now this gun's much lighter, has the exact same ergonomics, but still is extremely pleasant to shoot. Yep, nice shooting handgun. Now because it does have that polymer frame, you can definitely tell it has a little bit more pep in its step. All right, back to the Israeli surplus 941F, and F means frame-mounted safety. You would find some of these guns being imported by Magnum Research, manufactured by IWI, that actually have a decocker safety on the slide in place of the frame-mounted safety. To my knowledge, those were not military-issue pistols. Those were for export only. All the military and police service pistols in Israel would have this frame-mounted safety. All right, with the safety on, you can't pull the slide to the rear. If you take the safety off, you can ready the gun, put the safety on, and if you pull the trigger, nothing happens. And like a 1911, you can ride it very safely, and your thumb stays well away from the slide stop, slide release. And so if you're a 1911 shooter, you're going to find that this particular handgun is very familiar to you. Mag catch, mag release, very easy to get to. And this one has a lanyard on it, which you won't see on the import models for commercial sales. And the soldier or police officer that carried it had my idea of using pink to keep people from stealing things, because this one has pink markings on the magazine, which didn't come from the factory. Field stripping a Jericho 941 is really simple to do. First, you're going to want to clear the weapon. This one does not have a magazine in it. And then lock the slide to the rear and make sure that your chamber is empty. Now on this side of the handgun, you'll notice there's two little dots. There's one on the slide and one on the frame. What you want to do is push the slide back until those dots align like that. And then you can push the cross pin across. So I'm going to do it facing this way. I just grab the gun like this, pull it slightly to the rear so I can see those dots are lined up. And then with my index finger, I'm going to push on the pin right here. That pin will pop right out. And without pulling the trigger, you can separate the upper and lower halves. Take the recoil spring out. It's captive on the guide rod. And then you can take your barrel out. Now this is very much like a Browning high power in design. Very, very much. Put it back together, you just reverse the process. Line those little dots up again and push your pin across. And she's back together. Very simple to do. When I found out that these handguns were available via a blast email from Classic Firearms, I immediately went over to their website and purchased one. And I purchased the Hand Select. And with that, with shipping, was just a little over $400. They saw my name and they refunded my card and sent me the gun anyway. So that's just in full disclosure. I attempted to buy the gun. They refunded my money. Doesn't influence my opinion one way or the other about the gun. I like the Jericho. I've always liked the Jericho. I've always liked the CZ75. And I've really wanted to get my hands on one of these police handguns with that trigger system, single action only, because it was always interesting to me and I just had never seen them pop on the collector's market, at least not that often. And this is a variation a lot of people simply don't know about. All right, guys, if you'd like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, a great way to do that is to become a YouTube member. There's a little join button just underneath the video player. Click that join button and check out some of the perks and see if you'd like to join our membership program. Also, we have a link to Patreon in the description below. Follow that link, check out some of the perks. We do even more over there, and consider becoming a Patreon supporter of the channel. Guys, thanks for 12 years of support, and also swing by, check out coppercustom.com. All right, and we'll talk to you soon. about that pink magazine, Jason made a comment that it very well could have been a female Israeli officer's magazine. And Jason likes Israeli female officers. And I've been to Israel, and I would say that they are, you know, average looking, in case my wife is watching.